Happy Friday, Miami. This is Buy, Sell, Hold, a real estate podcast about what's going on in the Miami real estate market. I'm Peter Zalewski. I'm a condo consultant. I'm also the founder of the Miami Condo Investing Club. I'm here with my co-host, the moderator of the show, no one else but Daniel Hernandez. He is a real estate professional over at Compass Real Estate in Coconut Grove. He does single-family houses as well as condos. Daniel will be running the show, so let me pass him the baton. What's up, Daniel?
What's up, Peter? Running the show. This is a joint partnership we have here, and I like to keep it that way. But Peter, I couldn't do it without you, man. I really couldn't. Everybody, this is Buy, Sell, Hold, episode number 27. It is almost Thanksgiving, almost the holidays, and that means, Peter, we're ramping up for winter buying season, and we have so much to talk about. So much, in fact, I think next week we're going to pre-record the interview, the podcast, because who's driving home on Friday after Thanksgiving? Everybody's probably sleeping, but stay tuned for that. This week, we have 5 incredibly compelling stories, and I want to jump right into it. But if this is your first time joining us, Buy, Sell, Hold Miami, this is a talk show about Miami real estate. And we're going to talk about buildings. We're going to talk about houses. We're going to talk about condos. And, sometimes we have to talk about politics. We don't mean to, but it happens here because so much of it has to do with real estate here in Miami. So at the end of each topic, you're going to see in the bottom left of your screen, we're going to buy, we're going to sell, or we're going to hold it after we talk about it. We might not always agree, but usually we get to the bottom of something. So with that, Peter, I'm going to kick it off. FEMA numbers flooded with discrepancies. So the story came out earlier this week talking about how what's happening on the ground in a lot of municipalities, pun intended, isn't actually reflected in the FEMA flood maps. And so for anybody that doesn't know, FEMA, federal organization, they release these flood maps every so often. And these are really important because when you go to buy a house, especially in a place like South Florida, we're concerned with climate change and rising tides and all that good stuff. Well, when you go to take out an insurance policy, your mortgager, your mortgagee, the bank is your mortgagee. Your mortgagee, your lender will say, hey, you need flood insurance. And they base that on the flood insurance map, the FEMA flood insurance map. Well, what we're seeing here, and the Miami Herald put out a story earlier this week, what we're seeing here is that sometimes what's happening when it rains doesn't coincide with what's happening on the FEMA flood map, meaning that places that shouldn't be flooding are indeed flooding. And that is sort of, scary because so much of what happens here in real estate in South Florida is based off it's the insurance crisis. And we have an insurance crisis because insurance costs are going up and up and up and up. But if the insurers are basing their numbers off of this FEMA flood map, Pete, then how are they making financial decisions, on your insurance premiums based off of that data? Is it right? Is it wrong? How do we even fix this? And I need to also add that the FEMA head resigned on Tuesday. So that doesn't give me much faith in that organization.
Wait, Daniel, we didn't get the October employment numbers. Did you notice that?
I didn't, but I know now.
Yeah, so they actually canceled the October employment numbers, and we missed a bunch of numbers while the federal government was shut down for north of 40 days, the longest shutdown in U.S. history from everything I've read. So not necessarily having up-to-date information. It's not a new thing. It's something that's been going on quite some time. But the Miami Herald, kudos to them. Miami Herald's very good when it comes to the investigative part of it. I just want to read just a paragraph or two from the story because I think it encapsulates everything. And really what the Herald says is the Herald, using the best available data, they tracked 16,569 flood complaints from more than 12,000 locations in Miami-Dade and Broward County over the last 11 years, and it put together a comprehensive map. But these two admittedly provide only a partial picture and almost certainly underestimate the problem. That's because lots of flooding is never reported to the agency. Why would you report something if it's minimal? Because your price is probably going to go up.
It's like, how they say you never even call your insurance company to ask for a quote of what if, because that goes into their CRM saying, oh, well, he called. And that goes into their algorithm, their formula, and your insurance premium could go up as a result of you calling. And you mentioned that the Herald said something about doing their own study, looking into the Miami-Dade County records. Now, Miami-Dade County actually tracks this on their own because we're Miami-Dade County and we're sort of at the epicenter of climate change and residents and us living in this environment.
I don't think can you say climate change in Florida? I thought it was eliminated from the books. No,
from the lexicon.
Yeah, from the lexicon. Wasn't it an official decree
so what do
or
we
something?
say?
Well, let's just say it's it floods.
Oh, it floods. So
Yeah,
so when a
floods.
torrential downpour, not even hurricane, I don't know if you remember last fall in Fort Lauderdale, they received something like 20 something inches of rain in a matter of hours. And this is, this Miami Herald story points to that event, non-hurricane, non-tropical weather, just, another day in the life. And some of our municipalities here, Miami-Dade County is what I'm talking about, we track this. But if you go to other counties, maybe they don't have the funding to track it. Maybe it doesn't happen often enough for, their constituents to demand that they track it. So they are 100% basing all of their analysis off of the FEMA numbers. So if the FEMA numbers are incorrect, then, well, does it flood or does it not flood? I guess I just got to buy, sit, and wait for it to rain.
I guess you probably do, or maybe when maybe a recommendation. Anybody going out to look at a single family house, look and see if there's a high water mark. You go to some of these cities, like I was in Asheville before this Helene came by a few years back, and they used to point to this point near the river where it was a high water mark. Well, apparently after Helene, they surpassed that. But anybody looking for the last 100 years, they would have known what the high water mark is. Good luck trying to find that here. Or New Orleans, you can definitely find it because of Hurricane Katrina. In others. But this is all part of, I would argue, this is part of Florida. I mean, maybe we don't want the information because the information is going to bring transparency. With transparency comes price adjustment. People make decisions based on having the information. And if you have a lack of information, if it's omitted, if it simply is lagging behind, you can't necessarily make a case one way or another. Much like the employment numbers in October. We're not going to know if the market was softening or not softening. Remember, because Federal Reserve Chairman Greenspan, he made a decision, not Greenspan, I keep saying Greenspan, Powell. He made a decision about employment and nobody really knows what's going on. So sometimes the lack of information is great for the market because both sides can argue the case. But I think the bottom line is we have modern technology. We can pinpoint where somebody is based on their internet, based on their phone. I was in Cuba when it was permissible to go. You couldn't get internet on the island except if you were a public park. But let me tell you what, Daniel, I could use my Google Maps anywhere on the island. And I was blown away that Google Maps worked, even though there was no internet service. So the point I'm making is if they wanted to figure it out, they could figure it out. But I think there would be some repercussions to figuring out. And maybe it's like it's like the big secret nobody wants to talk about because price valuations will change. So will insurance. That's why nobody calls. That's why the Herald had to do what they do, because you don't want to turn yourself in and put yourself on the record. And it's much like a used car. If you were in an accident, you go to Carfax or anything like that, you're going to know it was in an accident and the buyer coming in is going to pay you less. So, I'm sure there's a push-pull related to that, but kudos to the Herald.
Well, now, and this has been a recent change in transactions, even if you're not in a flood zone, if you have nothing to do, flood disclosures are required across the board. So if you're in a condo, you have to know if your neighbor upstairs bathroom overflowed and there was any sort of water damage. And it doesn't matter if you're 5 feet above sea level or 50 feet above sea level, although I don't think anybody's above 50 feet above sea level here. The point is that disclosure, and it is required no matter what. I'm sure you can waive it, right? If you want to buy something, just buy something. But the standard is you have to disclose. And so whether or not the FEMA numbers are right or wrong, once pen goes to paper and you got to transact, I give you money, you give me deed, I have to say whether or not this house is flooded before. Not if it's going to flood in 100 years, if it's going to flood in 1,000 years. You have those 1 in 100 year numbers, 1 in 1,000 year numbers. But I don't know. This makes me very nervous. Because if you can't, is the FEMA map just a rubber stamp? Is it just a watermark?
Well, I think because the flood insurance is pretty much a nationwide backstop for the market, because private sector didn't necessarily want to get in there, so the government stepped in. You don't have to step in for certain things, whether it's like traffic lights or it's the military or things like that. I think they just stepped in, and what difference does it really make? Because the government is going to be primarily going to be backstopping it with the flood insurance, at least the best of my understanding. But what I would tell you is, if you're worried about flooding, Move into a condo. They build condos down here. The first 8 stories are going to be the pedestal, the common areas on top of it. And they build these towers so there's nothing on the ground floor and it's raised. So if you're that worried about flooding, move into a condo. If you go into a house, assume it's going to flood. And if you take that perspective, hey, what could go wrong?
With that, are you buy, sell, hold on FEMA numbers flooded with discrepancies?
I am a buy, and kudos to the Herald. This is what they do well, and they've been doing it well for quite some time.
I too am a buy. Moving on. Why so blue, Martini? What I felt very proud of that pun. I've been putting a lot of work into our rundown titles, and that just I was inspired. What can I say? So Blue Martini, the famous bar watering hole up at Galleria in Fort Lauderdale, which has gotten a lot of press because they're supposed to get redeveloped, much to the chagrin of the local residents. But Blue Martini, this local watering hole, is kaput. And what I want to talk about here, Peter, is what is this?
Well, they're still operating. They're still operating.
Well, they're still operating. Okay, they're still operating. They filed for bankruptcy, and you can sit in bankruptcy and still operate for a long time.
Yep. This particular location, according to the Miami New Times.
Right. So what I want to discuss is what if Blue Martini can't make it, who's having a good time in terms of a watering hole proprietor, right? We keep on reading these reports that Gen Z doesn't drink anymore. They're California sober. You know what California sober is, Pete?
No, I can. No. Please tell me. I want to hear your explanation.
California sober is when you only smoke pot.
Ah, there you go.
Nice, right?
Perfect.
So, yeah, in California sober, they only smoke pot, or, I don't drink, but I do ketamine every other day sort of thing. The new generation is all wacky. But if the bar scene is having a difficult time, why are we building out $55 million entertainment venues like the Amazonico? Amazonico is the new group, Paraguas group out of Spain, came over here and built this ginormous venue right there on the corner of Brickell Avenue and 8th Street. So right there across from Brickell City Center, you got Komodo opposite. Komodo, by the way, is one of the top 10 highest grossing restaurants, independent restaurants in the country. Wow. Joe's is number one, in case you were curious. I think they did 50 million last year. But an outfit like this comes to Miami, spends $55 million. You got to sell a lot of cocktails to get your money back on this one. What's the rub here?
Well, I mean, I always say if you want family entertainment, you go to Orlando. You want adult entertainment, and I mean that very simplistic, you come to Miami. So Miami sells the night and Orlando sells the day for the families, if you will. And a lot of it's always been people who move down here, they always complain that, well, I come here, there's nothing to do other than go out drinking. Everybody goes out drinking. It's a party vibe. You go out at 11 o'clock, you get home when the sun comes up. Denny's is slammed in the morning with the people who are going for the traditional breakfast and the other people who are trying to get something to eat on the way home. So that's been the mentality. That's been the vibe. It's changed a little bit since the pandemic. But, going back to this Blue Martini, Blue Martini was a situation or a bar that kind of came on the scene, especially in the Miami area, and ultimately went up to Fort Lauderdale. But it came on the scene during the Great Recession. I remember we used to go in there. We'd be out on the streets hunting distressed condos and doing stuff. And we go in Blue Martini right at Mary Brickell Village. And we'd be like, oh, wow, this place is dead. Nothing's going on, but it's kind of got a cool vibe. It's got some music. It's got like a Latin aspect to it. It overlooked Mary Brickell Village. And you look at the one in Fort Lauderdale, again, a central location, great locations. That was sort of their key. They always had like good music. The drinks were reasonably priced, and it was just a good vibe. And, when it started, it was nobody was going. And then the economy showed that things were happening. And then all of a sudden it blew up and it was really good. And then they were charging covers. So fast forward to where we are today, and now it's becoming extremely difficult for every reason you just said. And one I would also add is the economy. Remember, the employment growth or the job numbers are so bad in terms of what the Federal Reserve is seeing, the Central Bank of the United States. They decided to pivot away from dealing with inflation, even though it's on the rise, and shift towards job growth. So you got to wonder if it's a combination of people not drinking because they're, what did you call it, California sober?
California sober.
Yeah, so is it the California sober aspect with Gen Z? Is it also the health aspect? All the reports coming out saying if you drink any bit of alcohol, it's terrible for you.
Right, it's like cigarettes.
And then the final, yeah, exactly. And then the final point is, what if it's just the economics? What if it's the economics that go on? There are some stock traders that say when the economy's going bad, people drink beer. When the economy's doing well, you drink spirits just because of costs and things like that. You don't make a lot of money off of beer sales, although in Miami it's probably $10 a beer now, if you can believe that. And if you get like a Miller Lite or something, you can't get Bud Light because we got the whole issue with that. But if you were to get a Miller Lite, it's probably going to be about $8 or so for effectively the trashy water. So you're still looking at $10 a beer. But I think things are getting overpriced, and I think Blue Martini is a good tell for what's going on in the economy. Now, the demographic that goes to the Galleria Blue Martini, and I've been there before. They used to do a Caribbean night, so they would bring in a lot of West Indians who live just west of there. Remember, there's a big cricket ground that's located in and around Fort Lauderdale. And in the one in Miami, it really went hard into the Latin music. There was a baseball player with the LA Dodgers called Yasiel Puig. He was an all-star outfielder, Cuban-American, migrated here, went and played baseball for LA Dodgers. He got into a brawl in that Blue Martini on Brickell, just to give you context. So each of them has their own feel, their own vibe, but the common denominator is they're reasonably priced. Compared to, and if this one's running into trouble, it's a little bit of a challenge. And my final point, I'll just sort of throw out to you, again, keeping in mind that people come here for the nightlife and they go to Orlando for the daytime. So according to the article, they filed for bankruptcy. It has to do with their lease. The lease has gone up too much, according to the Miami New Times. And what they said is that it generated $3 million in revenue last year. Daniel, $3 million, the Galleria Blue Martini. And you know what their profit was? 77 grand. Now, I don't know how much of that was skimming.
Even making 10% a bar?
I don't know if they were skimming. I don't know if the IRS looked at them, but that doesn't seem like very attractive. That's almost like buying a condo at less than a 1% cap rate, like we're seeing in downtown Miami.
Wow. That doesn't track. I mean, what's the thinking here? A linen and tablecloth restaurant, the margin's about 7%. Am I correct there?
The restaurateurs that I've known have run independents. They always say you got to make 70%. You got to have 7% profit margin, basically because, you have to charge a 70% premium.
You have to charge a 70% premium to achieve a 7% margin.
Yes, correct. Better way to put it.
But you're serving food. A bar. I mean, I was talking to a bartender the other day. And I was talking about the mocktails. Mocktails are big because of this whole health trend. People still want to go out, but they don't want to drink alcohol, so they do mocktails. And if you go to any of these bars, especially Miami, you're not getting a discount for the fruit juice. You're still spending $15 on something with no alcohol in it. And I tell this bartender, I say, well, man, you guys must be killing it with these mocktails. He goes, no, actually, that vodka soda I pour is the cheapest thing in this restaurant because I buy this bottle of vodka for nothing. I pour it with some soda water for you, and I sell it to you for $25 because that's what a cocktail is, right? But the fruit juice, the mocktails, in order to differentiate, they have to come up with all these little formulas and these ingredients, and then they got to tell the intern or the new guy, hey, you got to go cut limes for the next 6 hours so I can make these mocktails. So making the mocktails is actually quite labor intensive. So they don't make a ton of money on the mocktail, but the market been demanding it, so they make them.
Yeah, according to this New Times story, so what Galleria up in the Blue Martini and Galleria does, they file for bankruptcy. It has to do with according to the New Times, and it has to do with their lease. The lease is being too much. And remember, when you go BK, you can ask the bankruptcy court to terminate a lease. It's the only group entity that can terminate a lease. So this might actually be a play to try to get out of the lease and or renegotiate the lease, or I don't know what the circumstances would be, but again, this is a canary in the coal mine. In that particular Blue Martini, that's going to target, I would say, more so those people who are coming from Broward County, but also the visitors who like to come into Fort Lauderdale, and they don't necessarily go to Miami. That would be more of a Midwest type of crowd, or maybe the New England crowd. So it might be a good tell on what's going on in terms of, or who knows, maybe everybody's on, maybe nobody's doing match either, because that's the other thing that's not happening. They're not on match, therefore they don't need to meet him at the, the Blue Martini at Galleria Mall in Fort Lauderdale.
But you pointed out something that folks not from Miami or not from South Florida need to know. Very different vibes, right? The Latin vibe down here in Miami, and then you have, as you said, the Midwestern vibe. I need my Uber driver to speak English 100% of the time, and that's Fort Lauderdale. It's not right, it's not wrong. It just is what it is, and people like that. They buy a ticket to an American destination. They want people speaking English, and guys, you're not getting that in Miami. So why so blue martini? Are you buy, sell, hold? And the question is to you, Peter, is this indicative? Is this indeed a canary in a coal mine? Are you a buy on that as an indicator?
Yes, I'm a buy that this the Blue Martini Galleria in Fort Lauderdale. This is a reflection of what's going on with the economy, and I'm not surprised by it. You listen, you want to fill the coffers, cut the price of stuff, and just to my point, Daniel,
They can't.
I talked
They're
to a
only making
restaurant.
70 grand on 3 million in revenue.
Well, again, I don't know how much sort of disappeared, if you will, but I was talking to a restaurant expert, and the restaurant expert, I asked him because I have this policy. I said, "Listen, you want to know what's going on in the economy? Look at the happy hour. If there's a happy hour, that means the economy's not doing well, and if there's not a happy hour, the economy is doing well because they want to keep their people busy. That's why they put things on discount. So the bigger the happy hour, the worse the economy is." So I asked this restaurant expert. He goes, "Yeah, you could say that." So there you go. It's worth watching the show just for that little tidbit. And now you are an at-home economist.
I went to school in Boston, and I don't know if you've ever spent any time in Massachusetts, Irish Catholic state.
Limited. Yep.
Their happy hours are only food. They can't do alcohol happy hours in Massachusetts, or at least not when I was.
Interesting.
This was 15 years ago, right?
Interesting.
Which I would love, by the way. I would love there to be more food happy hour deals. I'm going to be a hold on this. I'll tell you why. There's been some news about Galleria coming out, the redevelopment. There might be something else here. And you pointed to it for a second. Maybe they're just trying to get out of their lease. Maybe they have, 5, 6, 7, 10 years left on a lease and they got to get out of it. And this bankruptcy avenue is the only way for them to do it. So until
they only own, they own 26 grand. That's how much they're behind. So it's not like it's a big number. So you could be right.
They're not arrears $2.5 million in rent.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm definitely a hold there.